I moved into the old building on Elm Street, hoping for a fresh start. The place was cheap and quiet, exactly what I needed after a rough breakup and a dead-end job. The apartment was small and worn, but cozy enough. The previous tenant left behind an old typewriter, piles of yellowed notebooks, and a vintage rotary phone that didn't work but looked cool enough to keep. On my second night, I heard tapping coming from the apartment above mine. It was rhythmic, like fingers drumming on a table. The sound pulled me out of my reading, lingering in the silence. When I knocked the next day, no one answered, but the door was ajar. Curious and a bit nervous, I stepped inside. The place was dark and smelled of stale cigarettes and something metallic like rust and blood. The walls were plastered with newspaper clippings, photos of missing people, strange symbols drawn over faces, dates circled in red. One clipping was torn in half, but the headline was clear: "Vanished without a trace. Elm Street's unsolved disappearances." The name Daniel Price repeated in several articles. It was unsettling. I locked the door and rushed to tell the landlord, Mr. Collins. He grew pale when I mentioned it. "Number 4's been empty for months," he said quietly. "The last tenant disappeared. Some say he went mad chasing ghosts." I laughed it off at first, telling myself it was probably just a creepy hoarder or some local weirdo. But that night, the tapping returned, louder and more deliberate. It wasn't a random noise anymore. It was a message, a warning. I sat frozen, heart pounding, trying to make sense of it. Then came an envelope slid under my door. Inside, a note typed on an old typewriter read, "Don't trust what you see. Look closer." The ink was smeared, as if the note had been hastily written in fear. The next days were a blur of paranoia, footsteps echoing when no one was there, flickering lights, whispers just beyond comprehension. I found scratches on my doorframe as if something was trying to mark me. The typewriter from the abandoned apartment appeared in my living room one morning, though I was sure it wasn't there the night before. I started digging into the building's history. The missing tenant was Daniel Price, a journalist investigating disappearances on Elm Street. Rumor was he uncovered something terrible before vanishing. On one restless night, I noticed my phone flash with a message: "No sender ID, only, they're watching. They want you next." A chill ran down my spine. I locked my doors, windows, every inch of my apartment. The tapping upstairs grew into pounding. Neighbors whispered about strange lights and shadows moving late at night. One night, I broke into Daniel's apartment. Inside, the walls were covered with clippings, and a map marking rooms with red X on of them was my apartment. The more I looked, the clearer it became that the building itself was a trap. My phone buzzed again. "Leave before it's too late." I wanted to leave, but couldn't. Something held me here, pulling me deeper into the mystery. That night, the rotary phone started ringing. When I answered, a voice whispered, "They're coming." I spent the night in the hallway, unable to sleep. Neighbors started acting strange. The landlord disappeared. Shadows seemed to follow me. I found an old key taped beneath my doorframe, one I hadn't seen before. I reached out to Leah, a paranormal researcher friend. She explained Elm Street's dark history, cult activity, disappearances, and an entity called the Watcher that fed on fear and trapped souls. Armed with candles and charms, Leah and I sat in my apartment. The tapping grew louder, shadows twisted on the walls. Then a tall, glowing-eyed figure appeared. Leah chanted, and the figure vanished. The next morning, Daniel's journal appeared, revealing a plan to trap the Watcher. We searched the basement and found a hidden door to a ritual chamber, thick with suffocating air and strange symbols. In the center was a cracked mirror, the source of the Watcher's power. Leah warned that breaking it might end the curse. With shaking hands, I smashed the mirror. A terrible scream echoed, then silence. The building felt lighter. The tapping stopped. The clippings and journals vanished, as if they'd never existed. I still live here, but I keep a hammer by my bed, just in case. Because some shadows never fully disappear. What I didn't tell you was that after breaking the mirror, things got even weirder. The light in the apartment seemed unnaturally bright for a day, almost like the sun was trapped inside the walls. But at night, the shadows returned, creeping further into the corners than before. One evening, I woke to the sound of Daniel's typewriter clicking away on its own, keys pressing down rhythmically. I approached cautiously, but the machine stopped the moment I reached it. On the paper was a message typed out, "Thank you for freeing me." Leah insisted it was Daniel's spirit trying to communicate, finally released from the Watcher's grasp. Yet, a lingering dread told me this wasn't the end. I began receiving emails from an unknown sender containing fragments of Daniel's unfinished articles, but they were interspersed with chilling warnings. "Don't trust the light, the Watchers have many eyes," and "Elm Street's secrets are buried deep." Then came the dream. I found myself in the ritual chamber, standing before the cracked mirror that shimmered with life. My reflection smiled back, but it wasn't Mate was the Watcher, beckoning. I woke in a cold sweat. The image burned into my mind. Leah theorized breaking the mirror weakened the Watcher, but did not destroy it entirely. It fed not just on fear, but on secret sin, what people chose to hide. Days later, a new neighbor moved into the apartment above mine. A quiet woman named Clara, who seemed to know too much about the building's history. She warned me cryptically, "Some doors, once opened, can never be closed." I didn't know whether to trust her, but something about her presence felt both comforting and dangerous. One night, Clara disappeared without a trace. Her apartment was empty except for a note. "Watch the Watchers." That was the moment I realized Elm Street's horrors were far from over. The Watcher was still here, lurking just out of sight, waiting for the next story, the next soul to ensnare. And me? I'm still here, typing this out in hopes someone will listen, hoping that telling the story might finally put an end to the nightmare. But as I finish, I hear it again, tapping. Slow, steady, relentless. The tapping now comes from inside the walls, growing louder, as if whatever I thought I defeated is regrouping, gaining strength. Last night, I found the old typewriter pushed beneath my bedroom door, a fresh sheet of paper loaded with a single sentence typed across it. "You can't hide from what watches in the dark." The cold seeped through my bones, and I realized this wasn't just a building or a ghost, it was a living force feeding on my fear and secrets. My reflection in the cracked mirror's shards left from the basement seemed to flicker in my mind's eye constantly. And sometimes when I pass a window at night, I swear I see a pair of glowing eyes staring back at me. I'm beginning to question my own reality. Even Leah admitted she feels the presence lingering after all her rituals. The final twist came when I found an old photo hidden inside one of Daniel's notebooks. It was a picture of the entire building's tenants, but faded and strange. Each person had their face scratched out except for me, and written beneath in shaky handwriting, "The Last Watcher." Now I fear I might be the Watcher's next vessel, or worse, the key to its escape into the world beyond Elm Street. I've started hearing voices, whispers of promises and threats mingled, and when I look into the mirror, I sometimes see a shadowy figure behind me, smiling just before it fades. I don't know how much longer I can hold this at bay. The tapping is relentless, the whispers grow louder, and the Watcher's eyes are always watching, waiting for me to slip, to invite it in. I'm writing this as a warning and a plea. If you ever find yourself drawn to Elm Street, stay away. Don't look behind the doors that creak in the night or answer the old rotary phone when it rings. Because some shadows never leave, and some Watchers never blink.